Ex-homeless redditors, what was the scariest thing that you ever saw on the streets? NSW. It's not scary in the traditional sense of horror, but in the context of our homelessness it was heart-stopping. Me and my mother have been homeless on and off for about 5 years now. It was sometime in the last year when it happened to us. On some nights when we couldn't go to our spot under the time and dead center of town. If it was raining, for instance, we'd walk up the street to the local church and shift the trash cans so we could lay behind them out of sight to avoid the rain. On 1-2 occasions sometimes a cop would pull in the parking lot to either just sit for his shift or IDK maybe check the area. Either way, we had just settled in trying to be inconspicuous when a car pulls in. From the angle we were at, the headlights beamed directly on us. Could have sworn we heard a door shut and someone walking around, as they say there, for what felt like hours. When it was probably only about 5 minutes, we just bundled up in the sleeping bag and prayed number one was rounded these trash cans we set up. Whatever amount of time had passed, next thing we know the car U-turns out and we were good. But my god, does your stomach climb into your throat in that moment. Hope things get better for you and your mum. It's a long story but not that interesting, but long story short, I grew up in a very sheltered home. Through a series of unfortunate events, I became homeless. For someone who didn't know anything about the world, seeing people use drugs openly, eat garbage, cry themselves to sleep on a park bench, kill themselves, etc. I grew up real quick. When I'd get ready to sleep, I'd roll my windows up on some sheets to block out everything except part of the driver's side window so I could see out just a bit and have a view of my side mirror. I had a dog, and while he was small, he was also mighty, and a very good boy. I'd sleep on my side in the backseat and he'd sleep in the nook of my arm. One night he started growling and it woke me up. As soon as I opened my eyes, I was looking directly into the eyes of someone else standing outside my car while they peered through the crack in the sheets. I asked, "What do you want?" and he bolted. Sleeping is scary when you're homeless because it's when you're the most vulnerable. Lucky you had your good boy with you. While homeless, before I joined the military, I was sleeping in either an abandoned factory or in my car at the time. While sleeping in the factory, I witnessed someone cracked out of their mind arguing with someone else cracked out of their mind arguing over who was going to take the last of the heroin that they had. I watched as someone slit their wrists with a needle, covering themselves in their own blood, saying that they were the sacrificial lamb and deserved to get the last hit. Needless to say, I joined the military a few days later. Group of kids hitting sleeping homeless people with rocks tied to sticks. Seattle 5 years or so ago. They killed a few. I didn't sleep for days, and I still hear the sound. Was sleeping in the hills at our local park. Everybody called it Hobo Hill. We all used to sit in the creek in the park because it wasn't really visible from the road and cops mostly left you alone. A group of us were sitting there, a mix of 18, 20, 25, 30 years olds, smoking and passing a handle of whiskey back and forth. One guy got mad because some teen wouldn't pass the bottle. They bickered back and forth for a minute and I didn't think anything of it. No biggie. People fight over bottles all the time on the street. I went back to smoking and shooting the crap with the guy next to me. Next thing we know, the kid is yelling and screaming. The guy had picked up a pretty big rock and wailed on the teen's head to get him to give him the bottle. The kid was bleeding really bad and you could tell he was hurt pretty bad. Dude had grabbed the bottle and was swigging more of it. Someone called the cops and said where we were so the kid could get some medical care, but pretty much everyone dipped out. Never really saw the kid again. I'm pretty sure he's okay, but he didn't really come back to the streets. He was young, so I'm hoping he went back to his parents' house. That wasn't the worst I've seen, but it was one of the more memorable moments. Neighbors caught a homeless dude shooting seagulls out of the sky and hanging them on a clothesline. Called gaming warden. Shows up to arrest dude when confirmed. Dude says only means of feeding his family. Warden realizes true and not just doing for sport. Lets him off with warning with promise to never do again, as seagulls are a protected animal in these parts. When leaving, he asks with curiosity what a seagull tastes like. Dude says tastes like mix between spotted owl and California condor. In my car at a gym parking lot. Heard a scream so blood-curdling at 2 AM that I was equally scared and worried for the person. It went on for a minute and I looked out and saw a car driving slowly by the business front that it seemed to be coming from. I called the cops because if someone was in that much pain, it must be a mixture of overdosing on crack or stimulants and being hurt, or just a prank by kids. Not on the streets but behind some garages in the apartment complexes where I had a place. What felt scary to me was the realization that I didn't have a place to go. Usually after a long day you can kick back and relax at home. The dread of knowing I still had to find a safe place to sleep where I wouldn't be found was such a daunting task at the time. Getting in an argument with a guy who then proceeded to beat the crap out of me. Don't know what was mozzie scary, when he pulled a knife or crawling for safety without anyone helping me shortly before. I got out somehow. Don't even remember how. Another time I went to sleep at this crazy place we were hanging out. It was messy and filthy with comforters and pillows everywhere. My friend, now dead, died at 21 on the streets from bad ecstasy. Called on me right as I was falling asleep. He wanted to sing Michael Bublé with me. Alright, I said. 10 minutes later the room was engulfed in flames. Has he not called on me, I know I'd be dead. That sits with me. A shame I couldn't save him in return. RIPCC. I used to wander around a neighborhood with lots of homeless people, with a group of maybe 8 or 10 boys and girls between 9 and 15 or so. I was in my early 20s. I shared some pot with them sometimes, but never stayed to make conversation or anything because they were into sniffing glue, the little ones, or heavier stuff, and I was just a hippie guy playing crappy life. The thing is, they had managed to open an underground empty water deposit. I don't know the term for what I was exactly. Some valves and pipes in there, and they used to go there to hide and do their usual bussines. But some spended the nights inside. I don't remember exactly a date, just that the autumn was close and the days were becoming rainy. A tragic night, the rain became a storm very quickly. Don't know exactly what happened. I wasn't there, but 4 of the kids drowned inside. After that, the rest of them disappeared. Maybe they were rescued, maybe they just moved on, and the place was soon sealed and forgotten. The neighborhood was gentrified not much later and I don't think anyone remembers about what happened. Boy and girls between 9 and 15. Jesus Christ. Not homeless, but as a kid I got around a less sympathetic part of town. I saw a drunk youngish homeless alcoholic. Maybe more than that, he was all red, scabbed and icky, just throw a major kick to another dirty homeless old lady's head, which was just sitting and begging on the sidewalk. He screeched a string of mumbled unclear obscenities, violently grabbed her cup of money from her hand, and fricked off somewhere, not before giving me an absolutely blood-chilling look. She was just sitting there later, her tooth knocked out, crying about not having another cup. I went inside a nearby store and told the seller what had occurred, and he brought her a sandwich, some juice and cup with his tip money. It was like 11 AM. Way too early for that crap. Alcohol is scary, too. Don't you forget it. My mom and I were homeless from ages 5-8 years old. I remember the first night we slept on a beach when we still had our car. My mom parked us kinda close to the water. She took a handful of bars and passed out in the front seat. I stayed awake the whole night in terror, thinking that the ocean would just swallow us whole. I tried to wake her up several times with no success. My uncle used to be a doctor in the Bronx. He said the homeless would try to sleep on roofs or fire escapes because gangs had a tendency to set them in fire as they slept, just for laughs. I was homeless in LA in my early 20s due to untreated mental health issues, chasing drugs and a series of burnt bridges. I was staying in a car park at an abandoned apartment complex a block north of Hollywood Boulevard. It had turned into a spot for a few of my street friends and I to shoot up, bucket bathe and crash when we needed. One night I was trying to sleep off some cotton fever. When you shoot up a bit of the cotton you use to filter H, and a friend who was staying there asked if I could watch a backpack for him. I agreed, since I definitely wasn't trying to go anywhere. I fell asleep and the next thing I know I'm woken up to someone right above me screaming at me. This random dude I'd never seen before had a knife next to my face and was screaming at me so loud that he was going to stab me in my eye that he was spitting all over my face. I was freaking terrified on top of being sick. This went on for at least 5 minutes and I've never been more scared for my life. Apparently he was mad that I didn't open the fire door to let him in and he thought I was trying to steal his stuff. I managed to talk him down, but that was one of the moments that pushed me toward getting my life together. Lots of bulls happened to me when I lived on the streets, and every day I'm thankful to be in a better place, both physically and mentally. This is not my story, but I'm tangentially involved. One of my friends does drops at the major homeless camp. Socks, thrift store shoes, discounted grocery store items, etc. Everyone there knows her by the cart she pulls. They also know to stay away from her or she'll leave. Well, one dude either didn't know or didn't care to leave her alone. He snuck up on her, pinned her down, and started to try and get her pants off. 3 men, also homeless, came up on him, tore him off of her, and beat him to death right in front of her. She told me she was too afraid to move or run away. After the one dude stopped moving, all 3 guys just turned and walked away. She kept dropping stuff off once a month, but bought a taser to bring with her. No one has bugged her again, and it's been 2 years. She has really bad PTSD from that incident. She's in therapy. Scariest? I'll never forget it cause it was convinced we killed a guy but then seen him walking around a month or 2 later. Story time. I had been homeless couch surfing for like a year and scored and was able to spend a few weeks at my buddy Josh's house. Rip Joshy, I miss you. And we pooled our resources and just went on a bender. My thing was H and morphine. He loved ecstasy, so I smoked some tar. He smoked some weed. Well, crap, I did too, I think. Then we each popped triple stacks and decided to wander through the night in Oakland. We had some cops pass us and slow down, so we dipped from I think Jack London Square and we end up by some grocery store. We both hear screaming, but not normal screaming, like screaming that makes your hair stand. Josh was a trained mixed martial artist before his downward spiral, and this was still when he was a beast. Anyways, I start bolting towards the screaming and he's right beside me. We round the back of the store and in a loading dock all we can see is shuffling and screaming. A fight. Then we notice a chick. She the one screaming, and there's some dude fighting to get her pants off. I instantly realize what's happening in my haze, and me and him locked eyes as I hit him the first time. Then I felt something. Figured I got stabbed and it freaking pee me off. Right about then adrenaline overtook and I remember rolling him back over a few times so I could keep smashing his face. Josh was kicking the living crap out of him too. We stop and he's gurgling blood and crap in the frickin' chick. Some sickhead starts yelling at his unconscious body and kicked him, then went through his pockets. I asked her if she was okay and she told me to mind my own business. LOL. Okay then. We just hopped the fence and ended up following some train tracks into Berkeley I think, and ended up having a rough come down on the first South BART train back into Fremont. Her screams still scare me when I hear them. She was tough as nails though. Those were primal screams, and had we not shown up she may have been able to handle her own, who knows. F6er that I spent another 10 years fricking around crime and drugs. Feels like another life now, it's been so long. I miss the adventures and not caring about anything but each other. We were little addicts with all these big dreams and had zero idea of what we were doing. This was my favorite story of the thread. Has a little bit of justice and a little comedy. Thanks for sharing. I should be able to think of a lot cause I've seen a lot of crap, but honestly it just became so normal that I don't even think about it. A lot of tweakers doing tweaker crap. Woke up in the back of a car and got screamed at cause the guy in the front was shooting up and apparently I was shaking the car too much. Watched one of my homies get stabbed while he was blackout drunk literally 10 feet away from me and had to bring him to the plaza for medical attention. A tweaker hit a pregnant lady and got jumped by like 10 PPL that I was hanging out with. Had guns pointed at me several times, including held against my chest while I was pinned to the wall. I stayed at a teen homeless shelter and for a bit lived with people that were trying to beat me up, or worse, and they would kick us out during the day, so I always had to try to avoid them by slipping out before them or waiting for them to leave. Once I watched the car of a dude that I knew had a gun and was after me and my best friend at the time pull up, and we had to book it and we hid out in a nearby Starbucks. The scariest thing was when I was crashing on a friend's floor and heard his boyfriend hitting him, and had to call the police to get them to stop, knowing that it would put me out on the street when I did. It wasn't a specific situation, thankfully, but a person. Most of the homeless people in the area were really kind-hearted and chill, but this dude with mad gold teeth came around one day and stayed until I left that area. He and I never had a confrontation. but this dude was like Kafka on the streets. He was extremely intelligent and knew how to intimidate people in the most subtle ways. He started getting several people, even some I knew, to hang around him. He would get them to just stand in certain places. In normal society, this sounds benign and harmless, but I noticed that normal things I used to do now involved someone being near one of my potential escape routes. I started feeling really trapped in and paranoid. I knew I wasn't being delusional, because things had objectively changed. I didn't know enough about the street life to know what exactly he was doing, but he was, peacefully from what I saw, employing military tactics to gain power. I bounced like a month after he initially showed up. Frick that. No thank you. It's been like 5 years since then and that area did get more violent after I left. I didn't see a single fight or hear about a killing the 6 months I was there. Now I hear about violence in that area monthly. Real life isn't as exciting as the movies games sometimes, but you don't get to respawn IRL. One night after being discharged from the psychiatric ward of the hospital, I walked to a bar to try and score free drinks and a little cash. I ended up staying up until close. I did manage to get some beer and soda, so that was nice. Anyway, after I left, 2 AM, I went to go find a place to crash. I picked a spot next to a laundromat building where the outside vent was blowing warm lavender scented air. There was already some dude there, but he was asleep in his sleeping bag, so I just parked it about 4 feet away from his stuff and tried to get some sleep. Sometime around 7 AM, my ileostomy bag broke and started leaking all over my pants and shirt. I had to strip naked and remove my crap-filled bag, clean myself up and apply a new bag, all out in the open. I didn't have another clothes, so I had to put my crap-soaked clothes back on and try to get some more sleep. Later, after about 2 days, finally had to break down and head to the local Salvation Army men's center and beg for some clothes. While at the men's center I had caught pneumonia because my ileostomy stoma was putting out too much fluid, 2 liters a day, and I'd get dehydrated too easily. Plus it was cold and rainy outside. Winter in Houston. I ended up at the hospital again for 4 months and was able to find a sympathetic surgeon who did the reversal surgery for my ileostomy. This was at a teaching hospital, so once I told them I was suicidal and drug addicted, they sent me to another psychiatric hospital for another 30 days so I could get off the drugs and depression. Never been homeless, but I used to see a homeless addict couple in the city all the time. They'd either be passed out on the sidewalk or fighting each other in the middle of the street. Their favorite move was to grab the other, then spin them around and throw them. Kinda like a hammer throw, except they'd both be flung over a meter or two and completely unable to break their fall. Pretty scary seeing them repeatedly smash themselves against the road. Once the bus I was on almost ran them over. They'd also just start sprinting across busy traffic for no reason. One time the backpack the guy was wearing got stuck on a fence and he was begging for it, the fence, to release him, probably thinking someone was holding him or something. Never homeless, but made dumb mistake once. Went to concert in faraway town with no ride place to stay. Spent a night in the bed of a truck. Woke up around 5 AM to people doing him about 10 feet away, unaware of my presence. When the sun finally rose, a homeless professional found me and took me to the donut shop that was open. She was such a boss. I was living in a $20 a night motel. At the time I was a 25-year-old woman. One time at night I left my room, go get something from my car. I opened the door and there was a man right there ready to force his way into my room. I opened the door fast and just saw a figure in my right side peripheral vision like 1 foot away, so I pulled my foot back in and tried to shut the door. He pulling on the handle trying to open it, but I was able to pull it closed. Luckily the motel had doors that locked automatically upon closure. I ran to the bed and called the motel manager and he ran out into the parking lot in his pajamas. Really nice guy. He said it looked like the guy had ran away. I went and bought a knife and pepper spray the next day, but I never felt comfortable again. My window was also broken and didn't lock, but luckily that person didn't know that or try the window. Police, hands down. 17 years old, dead asleep in the back of a car belonging to my then girlfriend's parents in a parking garage. It's freezing outside. February in Canada. 3 AM. I'm awoken by cops dragging me from the car, wrangling my sleepy self. I'm 6'2", 210. Yelling about the weapon. They just won't shut up about a weapon. I've no idea to what they're referring. I try to explain that I've got permission to be in the car. Gave them the number for the parents. Worried about waking them up. The weapon. The weapon. I asked them to show me what weapon they found, thinking maybe a parent hid a bat under the seat for protection. They pulled on the handle of a window scraper with squeegee that was covered by a black garbage bag full of clothes intended for the Goodwill. I asked them how it was they felt threatened by a squeegee when I was freaking asleep. I was urged to shut the freaking up, then driven to an all-night laundromat, and told to sleep across the super comfortable plastic chairs. Freaking cops. Never shared this story with someone else because I don't want my mother to be in trouble, but Reddit is anonymous, right? I have been kicked out of the house by my mom a couple of times. She doesn't do it anymore. And one time I got kicked out, there was an active child predator in my neighborhood. I was scared shitless out in the cold but still tried to sleep underneath the balcony of where I lived. At around 2 AM I woke up and there was someone standing in front of me. I couldn't move and tried to pretend he wasn't there. I felt him touching me on my body, no inappropriate spots, and then he left. The morning after I woke up and noticed that there was an old blanket on top of me. It turned out that it was an old homeless man who found me because I was sleeping in his spot. After that day we were best friends. I brought him snacks and drinks occasionally up until a few weeks ago. I don't see him anymore, but I am very thankful of him. Seeing how real the organ harvesting is in South Florida, not to mention the people robbing graves and selling human bones for money, makes you not want to talk to anyone down there. This was years ago, but I'm sure nothing has changed. I was never that desperate, but there's always those people that have no bounds. I'm not homeless, but in my town there was an incident a few years ago. Some random guy set a homeless man on fire and killed him while he was asleep. The homeless man was an alcoholic and he used to drink a lot, so I suppose he was sleeping unconsciously. They poured him with gasoline and set him on fire in the middle of the freaking night, around 3 AM. The next morning it was on the news. Very fricked up and unpleasant stuff, and I don't know if those people are caught and in prison at the moment. Be careful, you never know who's walking around freely nowadays. My family was homeless. My mom and brother and me. We'd just gotten evicted and ended up with nothing. Someone stole most of the things the marshal put on the curb. Anyway, we ended up deep in a bad part of town. The sort of place where the sound of police helicopters was always present. My mom knew this guy who rehabbed houses and he had one half done which we could stay in. It had no power or water. Well, it had a 50-foot extension cord draped across the street for power. The house rehabber lived on the other side. We were an extreme minority in that neighborhood and the people there made it clear they didn't want our kind there, especially not poor and homeless. So we were constantly pelted with glass bottles. The house was boarded up, so the bottles just broke outside. So we stayed there a while. No phone. This was before cell phones. So my mom had to walk to a payphone to call around and try to find a charity to take us in. Sometime during this period, one of the residents on that street got their gas turned off. It had been on illegally and they got caught. They blamed my mom somehow for reporting it. We didn't know and had no way to report it even if we wanted to. Anyhow, these neighbors tricked my mom outside where a mob was waiting and they beat her with a baseball bat while my brother and I watched. They left her for dead with head wounds and body wounds. Blood everywhere. Somebody called an ambulance and the whole street cheered and threw a party as we departed for the air. So that was it. Seeing my mom being beat up by this mob for something we had nothing to do with. Mom survived, but I know it shortened her life and she never really recovered 100%. My brother was homeless by choice. Would just hitchhike or hop trains and travel around the US. He was normally smart about it, but when Colorado got marijuana legalized he stopped off there. Middle of winter. He called me and asked for a bus ticket. Had two guys freeze to death in this little camp he was in. He stuck to Florida in the winters after that. Guy grabbed me by my hood when I wouldn't give him money. I ended up beating him down pretty badly and broke my pinky. I should specify that we were both homeless, and I tried walking away from the situation. He then grabbed the back of my hood while following me, which I then retaliated in a bad way. Different life entirely. Crazy to think about it now. This is pretty tame compared to other stories in this thread, but when I was temporarily homeless for a few months after traveling, I set up a tent in the woods on the non-populated side of a local pond. My cousin lived on the populated side of the pond and I could use his kayak to get back and forth. This was the end of summer, so it was actually quite nice being out there until what I referred to as the omen started to appear. At first, it was simply stones piled up in front of the entrance to my tent. Large stone at the bottom, slightly smaller stone on top of that, etc. Clearly man-made. Later it became forms of weird stick art tied together with twine. Think Blair Witch Project, always in front of the tent door. It was probably some local person trying to scare me out of there, but goddang was it freaky trying to sleep there at night after that. I was homeless for 10 years. Once in Riverside, CA, we decided to camp in a dry concrete riverbed. We were travelers and had cookware. We decided to grill steaks and vibe out with some whiskey. We saw a couple other ragtag fools and asked if they were hungry. Dude came over and kicked our grill over. His girl got beat up by our homegirl and I removed homeboy. Our dogs were so good during this altercation. We used our only water to clean off the meat and continue partying and passed out. I woke up that night to a blast to the head in my sleeping bag. As I'm climbing out, I get hit 3 or 4 more times and fall to the ground, where I'm stomped for a good 45 seconds to a minute before I realize what's happening. I jump up and grab a pipe from one of the guys that hit me. There's like 6-7 people beating us in our sleeping bags using pipes and crap. It's dark. The dogs are quiet. Everyone starts climbing out of their sleeping bags, and when we finally get centered and ready to kill the guys, run off. Homegirl is leaking. Old man is unconscious and his 6-week-old puppy is smeared into the asphalt. Our crew's dog captain has a very obviously broken jaw and is barely moving. My head is split wide open in the back and on top. Both my eyes are swelling crap and blood is pouring out of my nose. My body hurts. We walk to a store, carrying our dogs, and call the cops. The cop walks us back to the campsite, makes us clean it up and leave. We found an emergency vet number and ended up releasing Captain to the vet for adoption once she was nursed back to healthy. One of the saddest days I spent on the road. So mine probably doesn't live up to some of the stuff posted here, but I thought I'd share anyways. I was homeless for around 4 months after being in a psych hospital on and off for suicide attempts. I'd like to note that the last stay was 2 months in a state hospital before being discharged into a local shelter. I think the scariest thing was meeting a guy who I'd met before in the hospital, while I was walking alone in a quiet area of town. This guy, when we were in the hospital, had been a major creep, asking me if I had a boyfriend, what my type was. At one point I reported him to staff when I was in the TV room, and he started masturbating through his shorts while staring at me. While it was just us in that room, I was told to stay away from him and not be in a room alone with him. So I see him while I'm walking and I try so goddamn hard to not be noticed. But he says hi and comes over and starts going on about how it's great to see me and how have I been, etc. I'm being polite and trying to be like I gotta go. I have things to do. He wants to know where I work now. I lie and say nowhere for now, so he doesn't know where I work. He takes that as me having frick all to do and starts trying to get me to come to his friend's house for coffee, and starts trying to lead me to there. I'm nearing the point where I'll give up on politeness and just stop telling him no and walk away, but it's early morning and we're still pretty alone on the street. Then some frickin' legend of a lady comes around the corner of the street and comes up to us and starts arguing with him about him not seeing her recently. She just looks at me and nods, and I just take that moment to walk away while she yells at him for some random different things and speed walk down the road until I turn the corner. I look back and she just yells a bit more, then angrily turns around and storms off. Like some kinda goddamn Valkyrie or something. So yeah, this random lady just saved my butt from this creepy guy, then just angrily walks away like it was nothing from this now confused and put off creep. But yeah, I've no doubt that guy had bad intentions. He was nothing but pushy and the type to have no personal space or sense of restraint all through me knowing him. I'm really glad that lady came along, and I'm hella glad she just kinda knew I wanted out and helped. I was pretty young. I guess the violence really. At any moment you could get stomped into a puddle. My first few nights I just kinda walked in circles around areas I was familiar with. If I saw cops at like 3 AM I would just hide in bushes or something. but there were a few cars that pulled over late night early mornings and it was always the same. Either it was a group of dudes who were like, oh, we're gonna flex on this 13-year-old and then would try to run up on me and shake me down, or it was dudes trying to get their child molestation on. I got really lucky. Nothing really bad happened to me. Kept my butthole tight. Got in a few fights, but eventually a familiar face drove by, pulled over and just made his mom take me in, and that's how I was able to get back in school and get a diploma. I know a lot of other kids like me and it's lonely as frick cause there's no one that really gets what all that's like unless they've been there. But for me, the others that have been there that I know became either an older dude's frick doll, a gang member, or a drug addict, so I just don't associate with them cause my life is pretty together. The violence though. I don't like to go places cause I can't carry weapons and I can't trust anyone enough to go somewhere I haven't been. So I'm the weird guy at work who no longer gets invited to parties and stuff. Just always feel like I'm gonna walk into a beating. Who knows, maybe that's karma. I did some fricked up crap to people. I want to say it was survival, and to an extent it was. But at some point it crossed over from survival to flourishing. I stopped acting like that, and I don't know. There's a little part of me that'll cut you as soon as I feel like an altercation is imminent, so I don't carry any weapons anymore. I am working on learning how to connect with people and suppressing various aspects of how I communicate verbally and non-verbally in professional settings so as to be more palatable, which includes not talking about too much of my past life. Thanks for this post, it's nice to get that out every now and again. To all altruistic foster parents, teachers, groups, programs that exist for kids in similar situations, thank you. I know it's hard, and I know the odds aren't in our favor, but you do it. The last 10 years of my life have shown me that there are good people out there, and I'm trying to be who I needed when I was younger so I can pay that forward. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.